Hello and welcome to
Hello and welcome to Colloquiapedia, the short, sharp show making the complex comprehensible. Each week we take a popular word or phrase from the contemporary zeitgeist and attempt to understand it in more layman's terms. This week we're looking at journalism, a phrase that I think has become increasingly fluid in our lexicon today. And I think that particularly as the technology with which we use to disseminate journalism and wider forms of editorial and content, I think as that's evolved so rapidly over the past couple of decades, so too our understanding of journalism has had to expand and develop. Is Joe Rogan a journalist? Is Gary Lineker? And whatever happened to this kind of promise of citizen journalism, the idea that we'd all become individual reporters within our own right, armed only with our phone, kind of chronicling the day-to-day and facts as we saw them. Did social media give us that in the end? But it became a sort of Faustian bargain whereby the facts ended up getting drowned out by the fictions. Now, we know that some form of daily chronicling, if you like, has existed since ancient times. But it wasn't until the late 17th century that the term journalist, which emanates from France, originally appears. And interestingly, the slightly different term journalism, which is more we're going to focus in on today, wouldn't occur until a century later, again in France, around the time of the French Revolution. And that journalism means daily publication, and it's more what we might think of today as kind of the business of journalism. Now, here in 2025, Oxford via Google defines journalism as the activity or profession of writing newspapers, magazines, or news websites, or preparing news to be broadcast. But again, that doesn't seem to quite encapsulate the full remit of the way that we use the term journalism to define and describe things today. It's Edmund Burke who's believed to have first positioned journalism and journalists as the fourth estate of society. Oscar Wilde himself took this concept and ran with it, once writing, "In America, the president reigns for 4 years and journalism governs forever and ever." Now, if I ask you today, do we still think that's the case? It's a fascinating term, by which I mean, don't mean the current presidential term of the US incumbent. I mean the term journalism. And it's one that, like a great many of the words that we hone in on and zoom in on Colloquiapedia, it's one that we probably think we've got a pretty good amount of clarity on at the back of our mind and have a collective understanding of. But actually, when you delve into it at both an individual and a societal level, that may not be so much the case when it comes to the specifics. So who better to help me make sense of some of these topics than our very own primary source, Dominic Ponsford, who's the editor-in-chief of Press Gazette. Press Gazette was originally founded in the UK in 1965, obviously in print, and it continues today. It's right at the centre of ideas about journalism as it reports on journalism, journalists, press, and the wider media industry at large. So I began, as always, by asking Dominic for his definition of journalism today.
So, Dominic, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, hi Jamie. Good to be here.
Sorry, go on.
Good to be here. I'm at home, but yeah.
Yeah, we are unfortunately on the digital. I want to start recording more of these in real life, actually, but sometimes it's just so simple to do it like this, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, as I always like to get people to start off nice and simple, please define the term journalism for us in your eyes as regards what you see as its definition and application today?
Yeah. I'd say it's the business of telling people true things about the world in a reasonably timely fashion. So I reckon quarterly, I reckon, is probably the least frequently you could get away with and still be a journalist. I reckon if you're doing anything like half a yearly or yearly, you must be something else, maybe an historian or something. But yeah, I feel like it's the business of telling people timely stuff about the world, true things.
It's interesting that you say that, because just for anyone listening, I've known Dominic for a little bit of time as the editor of Press Gazette, and I think you're very focused on that business side of it, aren't you? Whereas I might come of it as a sort of vocation or a discipline or maybe even just an activity. I think you've always been very focused on journalism as a business and on the promotion of that commercial side of things as well.
Yeah, I think you've got to be earning money from it in my book to be a journalist. Yeah, because it's uh, well, it's a trade, isn't it? Maybe it's a profession. It's probably not a profession, but it's certainly a trade or a business. It's yeah, in my view.
And in that respect, then to jump to that top line level and look at it maybe more from an organizational rather than in an individual level, to what extent do you think that media companies have slightly contributed to their own downfall over the past decade or two? Like, I know that media, magazines, newspapers, and so on had to migrate to digital. That's just the way the eyeballs went. So they went that way. But did they sort of not do themselves any favors in a way that they really went down the route of SEO, formatted articles, and clickbait? Like, is there a better way that we could have done it as an industry, basically, to make it more sustainable?
Okay, you plunged straight in with a big question there.
Yeah.
The mistakes made by the industry since yeah, probably since the 2000s. Where do you start? I think, with hindsight, um, probably the biggest mistake was the idea that everything should be free, information should be free. I feel like in the 2000s when we were just getting used to the idea of newspapers being, probably even in the late 90s as well, when we're getting used to the idea of newspapers being online. There was a feeling that from a lot of people, like certainly the people who kind of thought big thoughts about the internet, seem to think that information should be free. So you can't really, it was almost seen as foolish to think that you could do anything else. But I feel with hindsight, there was always a business model that worked for journalism that was a hybrid one, which was paying for stuff. So people paid like a small amount for a newspaper, not a lot. I mean, it was like trivial, really, in the old days. And
Yeah, subsidy almost, wasn't it?
it
You're
was,
almost
yeah.
subsidizing the production, and then the real income came later, I guess, from the advertising and such.
So yeah, exactly. So then it was, and also advertising. But then there was, I think, a bit like when Google started. Google just kind of built it, and they thought we'll build it, and then we'll work out how to make money out of it. And then they built it, and then they worked out how to make a shit ton of money out of it, didn't they? But
Did, yeah.
I think publishers took the same view. They thought, well, we'll build these websites, we'll get the audience, we'll go into it, and then we'll work out how to make money out of it. But unfortunately, the economics of it all didn't work out like that. I think we thought that the internet was going to be this sort of diversified sort of space and democratized, but we didn't have any way of knowing that actually it was going to be utterly dominated by two or three companies, basically Google, Meta, stroke Facebook, and probably TikTok. You know, in
Probably
terms,
even Amazon now as well. They're trying to get their hands on more kind of real estate in terms of eyeballs and stuff, aren't they? That
yeah.
me sort of came out of nowhere a bit from a media side point of view.
But yeah, in terms of time spent online, I think yeah, those three dominate in the UK at the moment. TikTok, Facebook, and Google. Yeah. So yeah, so yeah. So what could we have done differently? I'm not sure, but that's the facts of it. So basically, the really those particularly Facebook and Google have ended up completely dominating and owning UK online media and all the money that goes with it, all the advertising that goes with it. So you know, if we'd known that was going to happen, I'm sure we would have done things differently. someone might have yeah, I don't know, would have done something, but you know,
But it's scary, isn't it? Because I'm sure you've alluded to this at events and stuff previously, but it's scary because if you were to go the other way and say this is a vital public resource, it should be state funded and protected and stuff. We all know at all sorts of different levels in all sorts of different countries that comes with its own problems depending on what who the incumbents are at the time and what their agenda is for news and media. So it needs that strong independent commercial funding, doesn't it, to maintain the editorial independence?
yeah, I'd say so. I'd say the BBC is great, but we might love the BBC less if it was the only thing around. And you know, being state funded and effectively state controlled, that does come with drawbacks, doesn't it? Even for the BBC. So, but yeah, we definitely like from a sort of regulatory point of view, there was a massive own goal in the early days of the internet when in the US and the UK and Europe, they sort of made a decision that the internet companies, so like the likes of Google, who are publishers, I would say, but that from a kind of
That's interesting that you would
regulatory point of view, they weren't treated as publishers. They were treated like the company that has the telephone wires, or like the company that provides a sort of email service. So they weren't responsible for the stuff that they were transmitting. So it meant that they could do what they wanted, really, and they didn't really have any costs like for content creation in the same way that publishers did. So that was what, I guess, what gave them a huge advantage when it came to competing with professional publishers. So I feel like that was. I think you could at least say, well, we're not. Maybe if we're not going to like necessarily subsidize journalism, you could at least say, well, let's just sort of create some sort of level playing field for content so that everyone has to take responsibility if they're making money out of content. But if you look at like TV, when TV first came along, regulators immediately recognized, didn't they? Governments around the world recognized that TV is such a powerful medium that we can't just let it be a free-for-all. So they said that airwaves, right? You're going to pay for access to the airwaves, right? You pay the government for access to the airwaves because it's such a privileged position to be. Yeah. And if you're going to be on the TV dial, you have to provide, in the UK, you have to provide high quality news, right? As part of that, which is the independence of which is guaranteed by Ofcom. And then they realised that, you know, from a culture, from like, I don't know, England or Britain having a culture that we're proud of, we thought, well, let's invest in a state-sponsored version of this to make sure it's the best it can possibly be and have the independence of that enshrined. So it's not a mad thing, to say that when new media comes along, the government needs to take steps to kind of defend our culture and make sure it's not kind of overrun by sort of mad, destructive stuff. But I guess that's where we are with the internet.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, which brings me nicely onto the social. And let's simplify this. A, was there a naivety in the early days that social could be a tool to amplify rather than cannibalize, the dinner tables of the publishers? And B, is that if we look back at journalism more in its kind of discipline style, editorial style roles, as apart from purely the business of it, that whole promise of UGC journalism and everyone having a camera in their pocket to capture and document stuff. Do you think we were almost a bit naive in that respect as well, in that it was inevitable that the quantity and the level of truth and reality was going to go down, and it was going to be easy for fake news and opinion based reporting to skyrocket?
Yeah, well, so citizen journalism was a term that was talked a lot, wasn't it?
Journalism, yeah.
When smartphones became ubiquitous, everyone had a camera. Twitter, everyone had a Twitter account. Yeah, and I suppose that kind of there was a period, wasn't there, where I felt most people felt that was a pretty positive thing, didn't they? I think most people felt that we were better informed because everyone was able to publish, directly. I think, yeah, it's the last few years, maybe since Brexit, I suppose. It's kind of
there we go. Jumped in there on the B word.
probably yeah, it's become increasingly polluted, hasn't it? That world of social media. I think at the same time, the social media platforms they were initially very they sort of when a new social media platform comes along, it normally courts journalists, publishers, because they see them as being very key in terms of being content creators and also influencers. But then when a social platform gets to a certain size, it tends to just dump them.
Yeah.
and I guess that's what happened with Facebook and then Twitter.
I think Facebook in particular, it was like, I can remember being at association or industry events and, talk about rolling out the red carpet, like bringing Facebook in or the Google News initiative, and we're going to do all of these great deals. And you're right, it's like quite quickly after like a couple of years or whatever it was like, okay, thanks for that. See you later.
Yeah, I think as a result, those platforms become less interesting places. I think because there's less verified information on there. I think that human beings do crave verified info. They do crave truth. I think
that's another thing. That on the flip side of that, now, do you think if I'm trying to look at it more positively, media trust's gone down and so on, but are we realizing the value now of truth and real news and quality journalism and verified facts? Do you think we're starting to see people waking up to that a little bit, and a little bit of a resurgence in how much we maybe value journalism more generally in society?
No.
Yeah.
I think we are at a crossroads,
Right,
where publishers can do two things. They can double down on quality and sort of truth and creating a really good experience for readers that you can't get anywhere else, because there's so much humanity in it, because you've got like clever people finding stuff out and and giving clever insights and doing that in a sort of unique way. Or I think publishers can go down the sort of race to the bottom.
Yes.
It'd be very easy for a publisher to create probably a website that gets a huge amount of clicks and makes you a huge amount of short-term money by using AI to rewrite trending videos on TikTok, to summarize shit that's going on Twitter, just to kind of commoditize entertainment based from stuff that's going on the internet that may or may not be real, but who cares? So I feel like the latter will be a kind of short-term hit, but no sort of long-term business, and a kind of morally worthless thing to do. I feel like the former has probably got some legs. So I think that's where we are. I think what I worry is that publishers will be tempted by the kind of short-term gains from doing sort of morally bankrupt things with AI, and as a result, the kind of reputation of journalism will be lowered even further if we're not careful. So I reckon what we might have is a bit of a polarization. So like you'll have proper journalism and that maybe becomes more valued, and then you'll have crap stuff which is less valued. But of course people listening to me who will say, "Oh, you're just a snob. You're just not down with the kids, or you don't care. This is what people want to click on. So, who are you to say what's good and what's bad?" But I just feel like it's okay to have, you can have a great tabloid story that's about, whatever's going on in the world of popular culture, which, I might not want to read, but I can still say that that's based on, revelation or some sort of journalistic endeavor. Or you can have, a journalist, or probably a robot soon, just rewriting something that's happened on TikTok that may or may not be real.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary. I can remember writing briefly for a publication a few years ago now, where they were literally taking sort of popular videos off YouTube, writing articles about it of X amount of words, and then they had a really set, stringent process for how the SEO was administered in the CMS, and you found yourself, even as a journalist, spending more time SEO in it than you did on the content, a lot of which was just commentating on existing content in the first place. And that was kind of pre-AI, as it were, not pre-machine learning, but pre-AI as we might understand it today. And it was already, from what I could see, like massively going on. So I think when AI and ChatGPT did get really big, we started to see some initial examples, I think, maybe of where they were literally just like feeding it all into articles and stuff like that. And I think that is the danger, isn't it? That A, the quality goes down, but B, so does the truth, if the AI can just basically invent whatever it wants within a story.
Yeah. And I suppose, I suppose the flip side to all this is, just to be a bit more optimistic.
Yeah.
Is all this technology does still give good journalism a much bigger voice than it ever had before. So you look at Press Gazette. I mean, when we were, to be fair, we made a lot more. We did make more money when we were a print magazine.
Oh, really?
I would guess, yeah, because there was all the classified advertising that went with that.
Yeah, true.
So when in the days when print publications pretty much had a monopoly on classified advertising. So buy jobs for B2B titles, or cars and houses for local newspapers. So that was where everyone made all their money. But that when that all went to the internet, that was really what scuppered everyone. So, but that said, we do have a much bigger audience now, and we have different commercial opportunities that we never had then. So, Press Gazette has a sort of monthly reach of maybe 200,000 different people who click on the website at some point, and we have a daily audience of about 20,000 who engage with the email newsletter. So, and when we do a big story, it might get 20 or 30,000 people read it. So, which is that's an enormous audience compared to what we used to have. And if you look at something like the Kiev Independent, which is a little English language newspaper which launched in Kiev 2 or 3 months before they were invaded by Russia, which is one of the few really independent journalistic outlets in Ukraine. They've got I think they've got 20,000 paying readers. They've got like 50 plus journalists. They've got an audience in the millions, and there's no way something like that could ever have launched without sort of Google, Twitter, as was, and the sort of other sort of platforms that helped it to amplify what it's doing. So, there's a lot. There are a lot of pluses.
You mentioned Press Gazette there. I'm always interested these days in experiential or events-based stuff. Like, I know that you guys get involved in and do a lot of events. Has that maybe since particularly post-lockdown been fruitful in kind of branching out into those new revenue streams, especially going out into the physical world where people are maybe a little bit digital malaise now? Is that an area, I know publishers been looking at it for many years, but that you think starting to come to fruition in terms of monetization?
Yeah. We make all our money from events. So nearly all our money. So yeah, events are huge for us. We always did awards, which was a good thing, where we made a lot of money. And what we've really branched out into sort of post the pandemic is lots of sort of smaller events, which are much more about connecting very senior people in publishers with people who've got sort of worthwhile technology, sort of paywall providers or content management system providers. There's a whole smorgasbord of tech vendors out there targeting publishers. So yeah, that's been a huge thing. And like you say, I think a big element of that is there's not really anything which comes close to actually meeting someone face to face and having a chat with them, getting to know them, maybe having a glass of wine with them or having lunch or whatever it is. From a company that's trying to start a business, it's just that's it. That's everything really. So, but provided you've got something decent, if you just get in the room with them, that's a major battle. It's very, very hard to do. I think with a lot of online marketing, I think a lot of people just don't believe in it anymore. They don't believe it. So much smoke and mirrors out there in terms of metrics of people banding around, but you can't. I have to say,
I mean, looking at it from more the marketing than the media side, I mean, I find it very difficult to find any semblance of sincerity in any kind of digital marketing these days, particularly if one goes on the LinkedIn. It's just like, I find some of it so unbelievable how blatantly it's kind of written for the AI and the algorithm. And it's a little bit soul destroying in some respects.
Yeah, well, yes, all these companies have got similar sounding names, haven't they? They've all got weird names, and they're all sort of new and here today, gone tomorrow. A lot of them. So but obviously, Press Gazette, we have a kind of core community of people who read our stuff in the industry. So we're we there is a value. Yeah, there's a lot of value to working with us to connect you with our readers. So
It's a premium content environment, as we used to say.
hmm.
Just going back to the journalism itself, then, do you think that as a vocation or a discipline, it's changed at all over the years, or do you think it's fundamentally about the same thing as it was about, say, 50 years ago?
Well, I'd say yeah, it has changed a lot probably. The I think at its heart, it's still the same. It's to be a journalist, you have to have the same motor, really, like some curiosity and some sort of inner sense of justice,
Yeah,
which is giving you a battery to draw upon. I don't think it's possible really to succeed or to have a career in journalism unless you've got that sense of curiosity and that sort of inner motor that's kind of keeping you going. And because you'd be a bit mad, wouldn't you, to go into journalism if you were motivated by money. So you'd be better off being a dentist or something. Definitely. But you need to have that curiosity and that, and maybe a bit of what's the bit of vanity as well. It's the idea that you need to see yourself out there and see
true.
that
Good journalists really want that visibility, don't they? And that, if you think about an FT journalist looking at data trends or something like that, you can tell, even to this day, when they're pushing this stuff out on X and stuff like that, you can tell there's a pride there to wanting to be the person that gives that information, and an old school term, but still has that thought leadership, really, in that respect.
Yeah, or you just want to have your byline, have your name out there, your name in lights,
Yeah.
your name in print. The I think what's changed a lot is the sort of entry level journalism jobs. I think have become a sort of factory style entry level journalism jobs. I don't think they were there so much. I feel like if you were just starting out in print, you'd probably start out with smaller stories. You'd move on to bigger stories, but you'd just be essentially writing stories largely based on original information. I think the sadness is that there's a lot of people with kind of going into journalism are doing sort of 4 or 5 stories a day, which are sort of sort of based on trending information or based that sort of SEO type content, which isn't really bringing a lot of new information to the world. It's just sort of repackaging stuff. Which I think you see quite a lot of that, and I think that kind of does lead to some sort of younger journalists getting a bit disillusioned if they can't progress from doing that to doing something a bit more worthwhile.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, funnily enough, I remember the sort of media tech press boom when there were like a million tech publications. There was always stuff going on about regulation or investment or new launches or whatever. And it was probably a bit like that. There were always just a million stories coming out, a million new journalists, covering maybe more the quantity rather than the quality. That's why I try and look for a bit of hope in it these days. If we can get back more to that quality aspect, and we can, find a way to make people pay for it, then there is clearly still a value there, especially, in opposition to the pure AI stuff that gets spewed out increasingly these days.
I mean, yeah, if you're working for a subscription based publication, something that people are paying for, then I think the pressure on you is to find out information that no one else has got, because that justifies people paying for it, because that's stuff that you're not going to find elsewhere. But I think, unfortunately, if you're working for an ad funded publication, the pressure on you is to deliver content which generates the most clicks, so therefore serves the most advertising. I think, unfortunately, that's what leads you down a path of just writing about stuff that's already known, because people are will click to read a story that that's already known, that they're searching for because they've heard about. If you see what I mean. So it doesn't tend to encourage exclusive articles, because people aren't searching for something they don't know exists.
I never really thought of it in such blatant terms like that before, but like ad-funded content is completely different to subscription-based content in that respect, isn't it? In that, like, you're right, it basically is quality versus quantity. It's eyeballs versus relationships. That's quite a stark way of putting it, but it's true.
I think you can generate a lot of clicks with fantastic exclusives.
Yeah.
But I think it's a very expensive way to do it. It's more cost effective just to say someone else has written a great story. Here's our version of it. And then once you've gone on into the social media mass of search results, you're going to notice whether the sun broke it first or the mirror broke it first. You won't know, will you? You just click on whatever's got the more interesting headline, or whatever's the latest version of the story, which might not necessarily be the first one or the originator.
And in terms of impartiality, do you think we've got a better fix on that now? Because the classic example is there was a time, probably in the boom of social, where you might have an astronaut debating a moon landing denier. And I think Emily Maitlis, didn't she, famously went and spoke a lot about the way the BBC covered Brexit, whereby they called it impartiality because they might get one person on with one view versus 99 with another, and they felt the need to present maybe both extremes of the sides. But are we starting to get a bit of a better fix now on impartiality, or is that something that the industry still struggles with, particularly digitally?
Yeah, I think maybe it's always going to be a bit of a moving target. So there's an agreed set of facts about climate change, but are there agreed sets of facts about other things? I feel like, COVID was the big one, wasn't it? Where we thought there was an agreed set of facts, and then, were those agreed facts definitely right? There was with hindsight. So I don't know. I'm a bit nervous about like having these agreed set of facts. I think that there's not that many things which we're 100% sure about. Some things are true, some things aren't. I don't know. I mean, I suppose with coronavirus, it was very heretical, wasn't it, to question some of the stay-at-home orders, or it was, or the idea that the virus might have come out of a lab in China. This is great. We're getting into real cultural wars issues now, but but I think now most people would agree that it was nonsense, wasn't it? So you needed to stay in your house, and it was nonsense, and it probably did come out of a lab in China. But if you said either of those things in 2020, you would have been called an absolute lunatic and been hounded out of journalism. So yeah, it's tricky, isn't it?
But I think this is the thing I find fascinating about journalism, is that it always walks that line, as it were. Like I started to watch a couple of Joe Rogan pods more recently, which is something I never in the past might have done. But it is fascinating when you think about, proper journalism or reporting or something like this guy's just doing, which is just commentating and giving his own opinion, the way he sees it. Like, journalism by its very nature needs to be inquisitive and challenge authority and the established order and things like that. But equally, it does need to be able to provide what is the actuality and the truth and the facts. So again, I hadn't necessarily really thought about it in that respect, but you're right. It's maybe a bit of a tightrope that journalists have to walk.
And this brings up the question: is whether sort of Joe Rogan's a journalist
Well, I
or
would say no, by the way. That was a bad example to cite there.
well, I think he is.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, he's interviewing people, isn't he? He's telling people things that are going on in the world. Um, he's getting paid to do it for sure. He's doing it in a sort of timely manner. I mean, he's got opinions, hasn't he? But lots of journalists have got opinions. Um, Probably is journalism, isn't it? Like maybe well, he's probably not a journalist, but maybe what he's doing is a form of journalism. And I think probably if you look at like something like the rest is politics, which is maybe an easier example, that's journalism for sure. Or the rest is entertainment, probably is. All these, all so yeah.
Yeah, I mean that is a fair point. As I say, it's something that I shied away from for many years because I intrinsically thought of it as well. It's not verified by a big media brand, but as I say, increasingly when I listen to some of these conversations and the people that he speaks to, it does open up other ways of thinking or just looking at things from a slightly different perspective. And that is also important in covering stuff as well, isn't it? To help people to keep an open mind about things and not just believe the first thing that they see written in the first publication.
Yeah. I mean, what worries me about that sort of issue of impartiality is if you look at any sort of professional publication, if you hate it, you might hate the Daily Mail, but the Daily Mail has got agreed rules of engagement, which is basically it has to show the evidence for the things it says, and it has to give people it will give people right of reply. So if it gets something wrong,
Yeah,
it will publish a correction. It's sort of grounded in some sort of a strong tradition of what we understand to be journalistic practice. But if you look at the sort of dominant podcasts, say like The Rest is Politics, UK, US, all the other ones, there's probably more people listening to them that in the run up to an election than there are reading national newspaper comment pages.
oh,
But the, but they don't have any rules, do they? They can say what they like. I mean, I might kind of be more sympathetic towards, like, say, The Rest is Politics, for its sort of centre left kind of viewpoint. But that's the only viewpoint it gives. It's not. They're not particularly interested in balance. And if they get something wrong, there's no. I don't think they would necessarily correct it. They just kind of soldier on. So they're sort of it's a sort of new world, isn't it? And the people in that world are very they're often very critical of mainstream media, aren't they? Those sort of podcasters, but they're massive hypocrites if you ask me. Because I don't think they've got any particular. They're no better, are they? They're probably a lot worse than the Daily Mail.
exactly. I mean, I think the term mainstream media in itself. I was listening to the news agents the other night, and I can't remember who they were talking about, Vance or someone had been attacking the mainstream media, and John Sopel was literally like, "Oh, well, what are we? Are we the mainstream media now, or because this is like an independent pod, like." So I just find that a very old school and an unhelpful term.
I think I could probably say with some conviction that John Sopel and Emily Maitlis are members of the mainstream media.
I think the other person on the pod did say that, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, John. Yeah, I don't think you can. It's too late. You can't leave now.
That's fair enough. Now, I'm conscious of time. I just want to, as I like to ask everyone who comes on the pod, we alluded to this briefly, when you talked about some of the entry level jobs and stuff. But if you could give, one or two really crucial pieces of advice to the youth looking to go and carve out a career in journalism right now, they might be a bit apprehensive seeing the doom and gloom headlines about, media tech layoffs and stuff. What couple of pieces of advice would you give them on how to approach it?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite competitive, isn't it, to get into journalism? But it's probably not as hard as becoming a professional footballer or a sort of a rock musician. But they're probably similar tactics involved if you want to get into it. So number one thing to become a journalist is you've got to do it. So you've got to practice it again and again. So no one is born able to do journalism any more than anyone is born not being able to score a goal or any other sort of skill. Some people have got a bit more aptitude for it than others, but anyone can become a journalist with practice. So if you need to try and get some work experience if you can, but failing that, you also just need to practice writing, practice doing journalism. I think you need to do some sort of journalism course really, just to be able to learn how to do the doing of it, because it's a craft. It's like becoming a bricklayer or something. It's just you can't do it off the bat. You've got to practice it. So you've got to find a way to do journalism in order to get good at it. And luckily, that's easy to do now, isn't it? Self-publish. You can self-publish. Anyone can launch a Substack. So that's a way to practice doing it. Anyone can launch a podcast, or anything else. You have to practice it. You've got to want to do it. If you want to do it, I think you'll probably end up doing it. And in terms of the getting into it, once you've felt you've built up a basic level of proficiency where you feel that you could do something that would be worth someone paying for, is just sort of persistence really. And the key thing, which is golden in terms of getting jobs, is write a great cover letter. A cover letter is the only thing I think anyone looks at, a recruiter. So they'll if the cover letter is a kind of an interesting little bit of writing that shows and doesn't tell, so which provides evidence why this person will be a good employee and grabs your attention, then you're like, yeah, okay, that's great, and then phone them up, because no one ever phones anyone up nowadays. So if you write a good cover letter to like a named editor and then phone them up, they will definitely get you in for an interview. I could almost guarantee it, provided you're not, an escaped prisoner or something, because they'll just think you'll be the only person out of 1,000 applicants who's phoned them up, and they'll think, well, that person is hot shit. They phoned me up. I've got to get them in. So that would be, and no journalist is ever going to say, "Oh, that's you're too persistent." Even that's terrible. They're not going to think, "Oh, wow."
Well, I think that's why the PR industry survived as long as it has, with all the badgering, because journalists themselves know, I'm getting all these calls, but they've got to do it to go and get the stories at the end of the day. So it is what it is, as they say.
Yeah.
Thank you for that excellent advice. A little bit more robust than I had Patrick Hurley, the MP for Southport, on at the end, the last episode of the last series. And I was like, any advice on how to become an MP? And he was like, well, I just Googled how to become an MP. so okay, thanks for that. So that was a lot more robust.
That's a bit offhand, isn't it? Just Google it.
It's like, come on, mate. We got through this whole thing. But Dominic, thank you very much. Some great insights there, and great to chat to you as always.
Thanks, Jamie. Good speaking.